Who was going to say something? Me?
Good morning and welcome to our post-service discussion. This is for September 20th, and I am blessed to have a nice group because we get to talk about my service that we've just watched, titled "Transcending Malevolence?" ? So I think Martha wanted to say something.
Well, Michael, when you gave me that title as service leader, I went, okay, where are we going with this? And I really will say that it was a real thought-provoking trip through that service. It took like 4 or 5 pages of notes. But I think the biggest thing for me, coming from a background of, one, I was never taught that there was anything negative in the world, that God was love. Mm-hmm. It was an all-encompassing spirit, okay, whatever. Not a punishing person, not a punishing anything. We didn't have, we were taught to love and care, you know. And then going into education like I did and spending my entire professional life working with those that maybe were not as able as others for whatever reason, and some emotionally disturbed children and so on and so forth. I'm a great believer that in rehabilitation and teaching, and I see our society as being so punitive. And I suppose that comes from a religious background, how people were controlled in the Dark Ages and all, whatever, with religion. And I see, you know, when you were talking about prisoners, I see how our prisons are run without the high recidivism rates, the lack of rehab, even the school districts, as much as you try to talk about difference in the way different people are, there's still not enough people to work with these children, not enough money, not enough, you know, we are working on a hurry up and catch instead of prevent and front load in front. And that's where my biggest concern was. And that woke up all of that kind of stuff with me. And yes, the first principle is very hard for many of us.
Yeah.
So there you go. That was basically what hit me the most about what you were saying.
And there's a lot there, you know, that of what you just, you know, brought up. I will say that I worked for an alternative high school.
Yeah, I remember,
for a long time. Yeah. And so a lot of those problems that, you know, that you and I both, we know very well. And JC, you know, who worked with the Phoenix School, I'm sure can talk about this also. You know, one of the big problems is that they refuse to invest in the kinds of specialists that are needed for the kinds of problems that those kids are dealing with. You
exactly.
know? And so that is a big problem when we're talking about things like children who are growing up in just atrocious environments. So yeah, I hear you. Speaking of JC, I think you had something to say.
Oh, on a lot of things, but on the main thing that I did was to try and find out what the actual meanings of forgiveness were.
Yeah.
Because that seemed to be in the background of what you were talking about. And I'm involved in that personally right now with my daughter. So I dealt with the F-O-R-E part of it, and that, there's no E, but that's about time, a time ahead. Okay, then the give, this is my dictionary, and give takes a whole page, a whole half a page of meanings, and they're all colloquial. And so what I finally got to was there is an aspect of giving that is in letting go. It's not truly given until it is let go of. So that was interesting. It took me a long time and reading very small print to figure out just what forgive means.
Mhm.
Now, I have a little story that is way before today that happened with the baby across the street, who was about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years old. And I learned something about this business that you talked about, how much punishment there is, starting with the Bible,
Yeah.
and how we
Yeah.
grow up having to be forgiven. And I remember when my grandson Duncan was going to his first communion, and he came to me and he said, "Grandma, I don't know what my sins are." A 6-year-old,
Yeah.
and all I could think of telling him was his wonder, the wonderfulness of him, and how he was on and on. So that whole idea. But this is what I saw: 2-year-old wandering around in the street, in the road. Dad was working, cleaning the car, and he looked over and he said something that meant, "Please come here, come home, come here, come on our side of the street." And the kid did. And the dad said, "Thank you." And I saw that little kid's shoulders, they came out. All of a sudden, the kid had shoulders, and he walked with a firm step. And I said to the dad, "I just saw the man in your little boy."
Yeah.
And what I learned was, is by saying thank you,
Mhm.
he respected the child, and the child accepted the respect.
Mhm.
To me,
Right.
that is a brand new concept of the answer to why we think we can get any good out of somebody by punishing them. So that was like an 80-year-old concept of me that I finally have an answer. Okay. Then I really, really loved the idea of, well, you really want questions and things.
Oh, whatever you have to say.
But the nature of God making what he created come of himself.
Right.
I can relate to that God, because what I don't relate to is the selfishness that usually goes with giving. And that whole thing, if we take it away, which is part of what you do in nonviolent communication, you try to let
Right.
go of all that. And you see the selfishness as so different from selfness.
Mhm.
Selfness is what you create out of what's in you, which is why last week with Anne,
Mhm.
I said, I realized that coming from my heart and from love is essentially my choice. Consequently, there's a whole lot of stuff I can't do or say anymore.
Mhm.
So when she says, what has to die in order for me to be able to be me?
Mhm.
It's all those things. And it's the things that I've been practicing in NVC.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot from you, Michael,
Oh, well.
from your thinking there. And that's a God that I can sing about.
Well, that is a great compliment coming from you, JC. I thank you for that. Yeah. Going back to the story about the young man, listening to his father and the father respecting the boy. That reminds me of my own father, who used to play with us. We'd be playing like in the driveway or in the yard, and if we went too far, like into the street or something, then the game was over, right? There's no yelling or punishment. It's just, that if you go beyond the boundaries, then we're not going to play. And that was, I think, a much more effective way of informing us, what we needed to be doing. So yeah, there are, there are good fathers in the world, and and I think, you know, that's a necessary role in our families.
And I think the other thing, and I don't know what the meaning of this is or how far it would go, the heroes used to be the guy with the spear and the dragon.
Yes, that,
The
yeah.
people who go out against unmeasurable odds.
Hmm.
Today, where we see signs all over, heroes work here,
Yes.
they're at hospitals, grocery stores, places, the post office, all of these things. We've redefined what hero is,
Hmm.
and we've redefined what the dragon is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we need to put the words to it,
Yeah.
so that we don't think of it in terms of the dragon, that we think of it in terms of the thing that is out there, and every one of us who goes out is in it.
Yeah. Well, it's the, you know, battling against the uncertainty, right?
Mhm.
Living, you know, that you're living your life and serving your community in spite of the fact that there is a danger to you,
Right.
you know, and that is that to me, that is definitively heroic, right?
Right.
Yeah. I saw I saw Laura Lee's hand go up.
Well, I would like to, first of all, I appreciated your talk
I
today.
can't hear whoever's talking.
Okay. Is there a way to turn you up?
Turn your volume up, literally.
Or maybe get a little closer to the microphone?
Where's the microphone?
It's on the computer.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Not really.
Better.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
better.
Okay. First of all, I really appreciated your talk today because it really hit home with me. I don't know how many people are aware that when I was single in the state of California, I adopted a little girl. She was 8 years old at the time. And I was one of the first singles in California to adopt. And as time went on, she was a problem in school and just a problem, period. And she was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome.
Oh,
They didn't know then, and I don't know if they know that much more today, but by gum, she's 59 years old now. And she had a miserable, well, I say miserable, she enjoyed it, but she had a very difficult childhood. Her stimulus in life was drama, and she turned to drug and alcoholism and sex. And anyway, she's had a very difficult life. And she ran away from home when she was 15, I think, or 16. And she totally separated herself from the family. And this was after Scott, Andrew, and Michael were in the family. I think so. Anyway, neither here nor there. She left us. And I have, over the years, forgiven her for the hurt and the problems that she caused me. And I honestly can say I love her, but I also am very realistic. And she,
Oh dear. Looks like we lost your audio.
oh, well, I guess I
Oh.
didn't have much to say.
No. Okay, so now you're back. Well,
Well, well, go ahead, Michael.
well, no, I was just going to say that, you know, when especially when you're talking about children and you know, the people that you know you love and you're attached to, and you know, if there's an element of disappointment there, that can be really, you know, grief causing.
And of course, it was when she was admitted to the Psychiatric Institute, and she was, it was a, what was it? Oh, I can't remember the term, but anyway,
Mhm.
she did everything in her power to be locked up in a
Right.
padded cell, and she didn't come home for the holiday. And that this was before my children were born. And I sat in the middle of our bed and was crying my heart out. And I told your dad, I says, I want a baby that's going to love me. he just turned and he says, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Well, 9 months later, we had twins.
Yeah.
And
Is that how it happens? Oh, I see.
yeah, well, then what happened was I had talked him into having getting pregnant by saying, wouldn't you like a little baby girl of your own? And he says, okay. And so then I gave him twin boys. And so then I told him after the boys were born, I says, well, do you want to try for twin girls? And he says, hell, why not? You know? And then after Michael was born, I says, well, are you sure we don't want to go? He says, hell no. So anyway,
Okay. Well, yes.
back to the theme of the sermon, though, it was very comforting to me to know that I have not resented her. I have not, I have accepted her and her way of life, but I will not be taken advantage of either.
Right.
So,
Yep. Yeah.
I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, that's valuable.
Yeah.
You know, boundaries matter. And so, Donna.
Hi, can you hear me?
With loud and clear.
Okay. Because we were talking about evil today, and before I listened to your sermon this morning, I listened to a video called Boat Lift. Have you seen that one?
No, I don't know what that is.
It's about 9/11, and when the Twin Towers came down, and all the people on that island were trying to get off.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the story of how hundreds of boats were called and came and picked up 500,000 people within 9 hours and took them to safety.
Yeah.
An incredible. In fact, Pat Zimlin sent it to me. And so, talking about evil, here is this one part over here where we would say it was evil to destroy those buildings and all the people in them and everything. And then you look over here and all the people that came and, help these others. They didn't know if they were going to be bombed or whatever. They just went. And it was incredible how the good came out of that in so many hearts. And that the evil over here was, they did a huge thing, but the ones that did it were such a small number when you look at all of those who, came to help and rescue. So to me, that just, supports my feeling there's good in everybody, and it will come out when it is really necessary, and it comes out when it's not even necessary a lot of the times. But what I'm saying is even the ones who we have labeled evil, there's good in them, but they don't know that. They have had experiences that have not shown them anything but, fear and evil things. So I don't know who was talking about the prisons. We need to look at these kind of things as a really good opportunity to heal, not destroy, not get rid of them, because in the oneness, they are a part of all of us. How can we heal that so that this doesn't happen again? How do we heal the prisoners so that they don't get right back into where they were going or where they'd been in jail because nobody cares,
Right.
So, but anyway, it was such a contrast of the few evil and the many with their hearts just filled with love. So
Yeah.
that's just so reinforcing of my beliefs, but also it just makes my heart smile because there's that much good in the world, and it's still here.
Mhm.
It's here. Yeah.
Well, and, if you think back to the Las Vegas shooting, that there were all of these people who had to be retained in that area so that the police could do the proper investigation. and the citizens of Las Vegas loaded up trucks of like snacks and Gatorade and and really at no one's direction or very few people's direction. It was just the citizenry seeing a need and meeting that need.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I do believe that we are either culturally or genetically, who knows, but altruistic. There is a nature of altruism that's in us that, you say that like it makes you smile, it makes your heart, and all of us, when we see generosity or kindness, it has that kind of ripple effect that it affects us as well. And to me, that's evidence of the divine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe.
And there was one comment from it was his personal boat, and he answered the call.
Yeah.
And he said something. He said, I told my kids, don't ever say to yourself, I wish I should have done that.
Yeah.
Just do it,
Yeah.
just do it. So it was
Yeah.
a good lesson there too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Joe, what were you thinking?
Yeah, well, I was, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. During the discussion or your sermon, it occurred to me I had some very long discussions with Reverend Annie about the first principle.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how can it be everybody? Because, take the likes of Adolf Hitler and Charlie Manson.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, there's got to be good in there somewhere. And as you were talking about Hitler, I remembered a thing I'd seen on, may have been Smithsonian, may have been History, may have been one of these other such channels. And it seems that when Hitler knew the end was coming, that he and his girlfriend, who he married just before they went into the bunker, they went into their private bunker, and it appears that Hitler shot Uwe Braun. And the thinking is that he knew that if she were to have lived, she would be persecuted by the German people, and he had no idea what the Allies would do to her. And to me, that shows, even though it was murder, it does show some compassion. And then he shot himself. And, I still haven't figured out anything from Charlie Manson.
Yeah.
Because that man was just downright evil. I had the opportunity on several occasions
Who's he
in
speaking?
his presence when I was working for the newspaper and he was on trial.
Okay.
And you could feel the evil coming from him. It just permeated the room.
That's interesting because I always, and in all of the interviews with Charlie Manson, I always found him to be very charismatic and sympathetic. Like, I felt sorry for him.
Yeah, he could be very charismatic. He could, they would bring him through from the jail, there was a hallway between the courtrooms that the public didn't have access to. But the media would be allowed to get up in there, and we would have to just lean up against the wall as tight as we could, because they would bring Charlie down, and he would be shackled.
Yeah.
And a couple of deputies with him. And one day he would say, good afternoon, gentlemen, ladies of the press. How are you doing? It's so good to see you. Would you like to ask me a question? And the next day he would be walking down there, and he would be spitting and scowling and saying, oh, you're just a bunch of leeches. You just want a piece of Charlie. So he ran hot and cold.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. One of the paradoxes when we're talking about Hitler and, how difficult it is to wrap your head around how somebody could do the things that were done in World War II is that he believed he was doing good.
He did.
He
Yeah.
believed that the Jewish people were detrimental to the German society, and in his mind he was the good guy, so
And there were many pictures taken of him leaning down to greet a little German child.
yeah.
Blue-eyed blonde.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And from all accounts, he actually preferred the company of children, that he was very good around children.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Laleen.
I think I want to say first, Michael, that from the moment you opened your mouth, I found myself totally engaged and stimulated, and there were so many things throughout the entire sermon that just, started taking me on a lot of different trains. And I want to thank you for putting that much into what you chose to talk about. So having said that, I'm going to start with God and say I don't want to deal with God.
Okay, fair enough.
Because that's huge.
Yeah.
But what I liked just out of the very beginning, for me was the concept of divinity.
Mm-hmm.
And that all of us, have divine.
Mm-hmm.
And how divine shows or comes or works through us, seems to define evil or not evil.
Mm-hmm.
And if we throw onto the mix the concept of free will
Mm-hmm.
and choice,
Yep.
which I think we have to, then I liked what you were saying about your idea of evil was getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And I really resonated and could go, with that. And when it came to, notions of the Mansons and the Hitlers of the world, to me, that's, divinity getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But then JC and I got into this long discussion about forgiveness when we moved to evil. And I don't know, I couldn't help but jump to Trump for a minute. And I don't want to talk about Trump. I just want to talk about one's capacity to be selfless. Because I think that in divinity, in the divine, one is basically selfless rather than gathering things or wanting to give to self. So it tends to go the other way, and the giving goes without consequence or strings or attachments.
Yeah.
And as JC said, that is like the end. It's been completed. It's been full. So I wanted to say that, but mostly I just wanted to thank you for taking me on that journey that I found intellectually and emotionally both very, very stimulating and intriguing and branching out in a lot of different directions. And that doesn't always happen with sermons. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Well, and thank you. And, I appreciate it. It wasn't even something that I put words to, but you did, about the idea of divinity getting smaller. And, Wayne Dyer would talk about edging God out of your, of your mind and your life, so thank you for that. That's a very, very insightful way to put it. Yes, Connie. So, gotta ask you to unmute.
I just wanted to make a comment about the heroes versus evil.
Yes.
And right away it popped into my mind the different religions and their figure,
Mm-hmm.
you know, who was in a way fighting evil.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to thinking about the religions, like if you're a Christian, you believe your riches are you get to go to heaven, and all these different images of what you gain by believing in that hero. So anyway, that's,
No, and
I,
yeah,
go
that's a
ahead.
good point. That's a really good point because it cuts both ways, right? Because in
Mhm.
Christianity, you know, the pursuit of wealth, of material wealth, and same thing with like Sikhism or Buddhism, that the Maya, right, which is the material pleasure, will lead you not to heaven, right? And because the devil is the king of the underworld, that means that the devil is also the king of great material riches, right? Because gold and diamonds exist underground.
Good point.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry, I apologize because I think I cut you off.
No, I just thought it, I just thought about all those images like in Muslim, you know, or Christian, where we see this, you know, riches of sorts
Mhm.
in heaven. And I
Yeah.
thought, God, that's just the same thing.
Right.
That our need, our human need to have a hero, whether it be a man or a woman,
Mhm.
to help us see our way out of evil. That's how
Mhm.
it feels to me.
Yeah, and you know, I think I tend to think very kind of male centered, probably just because I am one, you know, but there are plenty of hero stories where, you know, the female,
Right.
heroine, yeah, is battling chaos or battling evil. And those are beautiful stories as well, and not all of them are super recent either. There's a lot of them, you know, that go back every bit as far as, you know, the
Oh yeah,
male hero story. So yeah.
Well,
Native
we're right in
American
the midst
Mother
of one
Earth, you know.
Mhm.
with the death of Notorious.
Mhm.
I mean, it has been laid on us. Where do you really stand? This was a life well lived, and I benefited from it.
Mhm.
And that's just thrown people into a real, I mean, those people who gathered on the steps of the Supreme Court last night, that's like the people going to pick them up off the island. I mean, they needed to come together.
Yeah.
And I can't think of anything that could bring us together more than someone who truly understood how important moral and ethical behavior is.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And what was so cool about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or one of the things that was so cool, is, you know, like how deep her friendship was with
Yes.
Alito. You know,
Mhm.
and so it's like they're like polar opposites when it comes to interpreting the Constitution, and yet their devotion, their love and devotion to the law, you know, was such a binding element of their friendship, you know, that and I found that to be very inspiring about her life, you know. So yeah.
Michael, I didn't hear, who was the friend?
Samuel Alito.
Oh, okay, I
Yeah,
didn't.
the probably the most conservative of the Supreme Court justices.
Did you see the deer go out?
Yes, I did.
Because I couldn't see it.
Oh, I saw him go right up.
Excuse me, that was Antonin Scalia.
Antonin Scalia.
Antonin Scalia.
And
Oh gosh,
Scalia,
did
yeah.
I? Yeah. Oh, I'll have to edit that later. Thank you, Julianne. Paul, did you feel like interjecting anything?
Well, you know, listening to your sermon, one of the things that fascinated me is the idea of nurture versus nature, as far as evil, malevolence comes into play. You know, how much of each may be a factor in developing an evil type of mentality or perspective on life. Every time I see like stories on the news or whatever, these hardened criminals or people that are violent or hateful, I always try to visualize in my mind them as a 2-year-old child. You know, sorry.
It's okay.
Kid's very pure. And what happens from the state of purity and divinity to make him into someone who was an evil or perceived as an evil person. I believe that there are some sort of deviation from that. I mean, some people may be genetically inclined to be sociopaths who have no feeling or empathy towards others. But I always try to picture back them as a child and kind of theorize what happens to somebody's psyche to make them into an evil person. Something I've kind of told with for many years and still haven't gotten an answer, but I try to look at it from a little bit in perspective because, like Charles Manson, you know, was he born that way or was he, did something happen in his life that led him down this pathway to being a sociopath? So just a concept that I kind of banter back with myself about. Still don't have the answer.
Yeah, yeah. And the inner child idea, I think, is a very important one. Yeah, and Charles Manson lived his life was abominable before getting tangled up with the law, and that's I think, of any survey that's ever been done, especially of like really atrocious crimes like well, let's say rape, for instance, right? The majority of violent rapists are themselves victims of sexual abuse. Often the male rapist is a victim of childhood sexual abuse at the hands of an older woman in the household, like the mother, and it's tough because these things are so difficult to talk about, but I feel like if we don't, then we're missing an opportunity to really figure out how to help people, So, yeah, Martha.
Well, just bringing that up, and again, going back working with children, how many of these children have been born with their brains disturbed by drugs?
Yeah.
How many people are born with the genetic propensity to some type of mental illness? It all goes back to the fact that the human brain is a marvelous creation. We are marvelous creations, all of us. And if we could just as a society or as a world or whatever you want to call it, realize that there are ways to rehab and help people. We can't just invest in the powerful. We need to invest in those that are having difficulties. And I've been just go back to my biggest crux is the proponent for being preschool for everybody, just like Canada does, and front load these children, medical care for everybody, 0 to 5. We could rule out and assist so many of these individuals before the quote unquote shit hits the fan, if you will. You can't fix everybody, but you certainly could provide some type of rehab or some type of healing, growth, learning, whatever you want to call it, for these individuals so they can reach their potential and avoid many of these pitfalls. Society is not kind to people of difference. That's my 3 cents.
Oh, no, it's a valuable 3 cents. You know, I think that just about anybody who cares about society would say that we need to give people the best shot in life.
Thank you.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. And where the discussion tends to fall apart is in the how. Right? So we all put a premium on the well-being of children, but how to maximize their well-being is where the argument starts.
A lot of it, I find, of course, dealing with legislators and government that I did, nobody is willing to allow this thing to come to fruition. People are not widgets. You can't change an assembly line in 2 seconds and have a good product in 5, not with children. Sometimes the product does not show up until 10 years later. And I think that's the biggest problem that we have with investing in people, because people want instant fixes and it doesn't happen.
Right. That's
a
good point. Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem when you have the people who are quote unquote in power, no matter how well they might try, get the pressure from other people because people are more invested in seeing results. We're a transactional society, many of us. And that to me is a major, major drawback into the development of goodness for everyone.
Yeah, well, we definitely need to get reacquainted with the idea of delayed gratification. You know, that solutions need to be by definition long-term. And so when you've got, especially like people in leadership positions, like politicians who are worried about their next re-election, the idea of a quick fix, becomes very tempting. And that's a big problem. Yeah. Julianne wanted to say something.
I just wanted to point out that early childhood identification and treatment or education, blah, 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 works fine if the brain is reasonably normal. But there is the subset of men with the double X chromosome, and they are 100% violent. They will end up in prison or dead, and they are a threat to society. And what do? Do you identify them at birth and isolate them? Because that would be the safest thing to do. And what is the ethics of that?
Well, and that gets into us. So that was an area that I was going to include in the talk, but I opted not to, just because I can go on forever. Is the idea of where do our ethics meet our desire for progress? So take, for instance, and this is, and Lucy, I'm sorry, I know you're sensitive to things like this, but there are, especially from like the 1950s, experiments on animals that were just utterly cruel, of like removing monkeys' heads and reattaching them to other monkeys' bodies, and then seeing if the monkey would live, and it could live for about 3 days or so. But of course, you can imagine the suffering. There was a Russian scientist who sewed a secondary dog head onto
I remember that,
first dog, and the dogs survived for a short period of time. Now, these experiments pushed medical science forward, right, of what could be done surgically, but I doubt anybody in this room is comfortable with those kinds of experiments happening to animals, right? Let alone human beings. That's one of the things that we criticize the Nazis so vehemently for, is that ethical you know, that ethical violation that just turns our stomach. So, you know, let's say you can genetically identify somebody who is going to be unrepentantly violent and evil. What are the parameters of our ethic? What do our ethics allow us to do with a person like that?
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's and I don't have an answer for that.
No, there is no answer really.
Yeah, does anyone have an answer? Anyone want to take a stab at that? Oh, also, Julianne, while you were talking, I giggled, and it wasn't because of what you were talking about. My mother's cat jumped in front of the camera, and she was trying to, you know, so just
trying to find my cat here, actually.
Yeah.
Just in case anybody saw that, I took what you were saying very, very seriously.
She disconnected me.
Yeah. Glennis has joined us. Hooray.
Yeah.
Welcome,
Sorry.
welcome, Glennis.
A little late.
That's okay. Better late than never. Yeah.
I wanted to tell you that I absolutely loved the music at the beginning.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Yeah, William is an amazing violinist. You know, anything he played sounds beautiful. So, you know.
So did you write the music?
I did, yeah.
Oh, I thought that's what that meant. Yeah, it was very beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you, Glennis. Yeah.
Well, you're welcome.
Any?
I took copious notes, actually.
Oh, wow.
And then find out that I'm late. I don't know what happened to the time this morning. Well, but it is, you know, you said that it's difficult to talk about evil and cope with evil because it's hard to talk about it. And we've had some allusions to it in the last few conversations that we've had, you know, and how to relate to people and not see everything that's against us as evil, or as kind of a learning experience. But true evil is, I think, when honestly you enjoy hurting people and you don't care, and I can't get around that.
Yeah.
It's hard to get my head around it because I can't think that way. You know, from the earliest age I can remember, you know, my neighbor, when we were little kids, he used to carry his cat by the neck. He thought maybe the neck was a great handle for the cat. And his mother finally told him, how would you like it? You know, and so it's the beginning of teaching us empathy and how, you know, our actions do impact others at a very early age. And I think in some cases that doesn't happen anymore. I can't lead to specifics or anything, but when we talk about it's really all about me, I don't care about you, then it becomes that, you know. So
yeah,
I enjoyed the whole sermon. It was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, and you know, Glennis, that's such a good point, because one of the things that concerns me is growing isolation. You know, that our internet age has not led really to people becoming more of course I say this like in a Zoom discussion, you know, but I think that our society is growing increasingly sick because we don't have the sense of community that we used to have, where you knew your neighbors and the kids would go over and play in the neighbor's yard, and you know, and you'd have cookouts, you know, block party cookouts and things, and all of those important social connections, you know, would help to diffuse, you know, a situation where a kid's like being mean to a cat or something, you know, where the neighbor comes out instead of the mom and says, hey, you know, you're being cruel, you're hurting this animal, you know.
And I grew up in an era where I could be in as much trouble with the neighbor's mother as my own.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that whole idea of like, it takes a village, right?
Yeah.
You know, yeah. I spent several formative years in Japan, and you know, our neighbor's house was was just as open as our house. You know, it was just for children. It was a fantastic place to be. So. Yeah. we're winding down a little bit, but I'd love it if maybe we could hear a little bit from people who haven't spoken. So Kim, can I call on you?
Okay. It's my belief with my religion that evil comes from Satan, and then God comes through and helps you out and gets you away from the evil if you only accept him, accept his love, and that God's a loving God and he tries to keep Satan away.
Yeah.
But that's how Adventists believe.
Right. And yeah, and Christian and Zoroastrianism, my faith, teaches that there is a duality in existence, that you have Ahura Mazda, which is God, and then the polar opposite of Mazda, which means wisdom, by the way, is Angra Manu, right? And that is, it comes from the same root word as our English word angry, right? And so it is very much the idea of like the Jesus and the Satan idea, or the God and the Satan idea. Yeah. And I think it's, even if you don't believe, I think you believe in it literally, right? Yeah. And
Satan is a angel.
Yeah.
Who didn't God set up.
So even
it's not just a devil kind of thing, he's actually a fallen angel.
Right.
Now, God believes in free will, and so he allows Satan to go around and cause havoc.
Right.
And that's where you come up with the sins.
And what I would say is that, and if you believe in it literally, that's cool. But there is also a literary way of thinking about that, as well as I think that there's value in putting a face to evil, right? So that, because we're kind of a visual species, and so if you can put a face and a name to it, then that helps us to cope with it. So. Lucy, and nobody has to talk, but I just wanted to give everybody the opportunity to. Do you feel like?
Well, just piggybacking on what you were saying before, you mentioned that Hitler thought he was doing good. He thought he had some value in what he was doing, and I think those same scientists back with the dog heads and such, probably the same thing.
Yeah.
I think I don't think anybody can argue though with the evil of people that intentionally and just for joy torture children and animals. And you can. I'd sit down with Annie. She may think there's some good there, but at some point you turn in your good card. And that's just pure evil. Just saw on the internet this morning, some guy in China was force feeding his German Shepherd to eat hot chilies. Why?
Yeah.
That's, and your music, by the way, I want to also say that was incredible.
Oh, thank you.
It's music that was just incredible.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, and because it's so difficult to wrestle with this stuff, that's why I said at the end, that it's kind of anticlimactic, but it's a matter of faith, that I have to believe that even these people who are behaving just utterly cruel ways, that spark of divinity can be lit in them, that it's possible. It's not,
I think a big fire, so the spark is sure to get them. I think a big fire. Sorry. Donna?
That's fair. Yeah, I know, Donna, but Lois wanted to say something first. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to leave very soon because we have a board meeting starting right now.
Oh, okay.
But I think often of the Norse gods that were gods of thunder and lightning and punishment. And I don't recall a whole lot of malevolence going on in their countries, up there in Norwegia areas. But as for us, I think that certainly there is a lot in genetic development as the baby is in the womb, and the initial responses that a child finds before they can even talk. There's always a response to everything that happens. I believe that the malevolence in the brain may be formed at that time. It's really hard. And then it depends on parental guidance through all of this, how the parents act with their children, that causes lasting impressions on how this person is going to treat society.
Yeah.
So I don't have an answer, but
Right.
I do think that this prayer that Donna put in the Umquest, I want to read it every day to myself. That how individually we can open our hearts and try to be better individuals ourselves. If everyone could do that, we'd have a better society.
Yeah.
So with that, that's just my thoughts. And
No,
I thought the programming, very good. You have become professional.
Oh,
And
thank you.
it helps so much to invite people to
Thank
watch
you.
our sermons when they're done well. So thank you.
Well, and thank
for
you.
your message.
Yeah. Say hi to the board for us.
I have to go.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Lois. Bye-bye. So I guess, Donna, if there's no objections, Donna gets the final word.
Oh, well, I was just going to bring up a point. Do you remember David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force?
Yeah.
Where they, using kinesiology, tested the truth? Well, in that book, Hitler was above love at one point, and his consciousness fell to below the 200 mark, which is, not life enhancing, anything below 200, but he fell in consciousness. So at some point in his life, he, had a higher consciousness. So I don't know what happened to him. I didn't say anything about that, but it's just it could happen to anybody really, if given the experiences and the right conditions that would maybe, like you were talking about the faith, that would, destroy your faith.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was very interesting, though, that he was so high at one point in his life. And this was tested for truth. So it was very interesting. Anyway, that's all I wanted to bring out since we were talking.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that point. Well, this has been I don't know, I'm a little tired, I think.
Sounds like you've been working hard.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thoroughly enjoy every Sunday, but this was a special one for me. So I hope you all have a fantastic day, and we'll do this again in a week. So
thank you, Michael.
bye-bye,
Wonderful.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Again, Paul.